Appears to be 6:30, so I will call this meeting of the Colerain Board of Zoning Appeals to order. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. The normal chairman had to recuse himself because he is a member of the church that we will be discussing this evening, so I will be taking over for him. I don't have the written explanation of procedures, but I think I know it from heart by doing this or sitting there so often. Basically, if you would like to speak this evening, you should have signed this piece of paper here, and I'm going to ask you to stand in a moment and swear to tell the truth. Secondly, we do try to run these meetings in an orderly fashion and in a friendly fashion. We certainly don't want to cut off anyone's comments at any point in time, whether you're for or against a proposal. But we do ask you to avoid any personal attacks. We ask you to be nice to each other. We'll try to be nice to you. That's the deal. So is there anyone here that is intending to speak this evening? If so, can you please stand up? Now, I don't know if I can record this from. Could you do the honors? No, I have to. Okay, do it. Is there? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you. Close enough. Very good. That's not bad from memory. Okay. You need to do a roll call, please.
Mr. Bartholt.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Mr. Reininger.
Here.
Mr. Roberto.
Do we have an alternate to seat this evening? Elise, please come up. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Elise Pilson, an alternate on the board since last year. And I know, of course, a resident of Colerain Township.
Thank you very much. We only have one matter this evening. It's actually, this is a matter that was tabled from our February meeting. It's BZA 2016-02. It's a conditional use for a recreational facility under Article Section 7.2.3 and a variance request for parking design and space requirements under Article Section 13.3.2b. Again, it was continued from the February 24th, 2016 meeting. The location of the properties in question are 8060, 8650, and 8666 Cheviot Road. The applicant owner is Mr. Rick Blankenship. Staff have a presentation?
Yes. This comes to you as a continuation. We received an application for a private recreational facility, which is a conditional use in the R4 zone. The applicant is actually the Missionary Baptist Church. Mr. Blankenship is representing the church as the property owner. This was advertised as a public hearing at your previous meeting. That public hearing was closed, and then the case was continued since there were more issues involved that needed to be satisfied and questions. We have re-advertised this as a public hearing. We've resent notifications, and we have also added to that there's a question about the variance for parking. So that has been included with the application and the notifications. For a conditional use, there are four basic things that you need to determine. First is that it really is a conditional use as recognized by the zoning resolution, and it's permitted within that district. Second, that the use is in accordance with the objectives of the Colerain Township Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Resolution. Third is the conditional use will not substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of the neighboring properties and will serve the public convenience and welfare. And fourth, the use will not create excessive requirements at public cost for public facilities and services and will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. Good one. This property, and I went through these slides the last time, is zoned R5, 2 single-family houses. There are also single-family houses adjacent to the north and south of this property. The applicant's church is actually 2 properties to the south, and that is where they have a church facility. These are long, narrow lots, still contain single-family houses towards the front. The lot is fairly level. There is a pitch from one side to the other. We had some questions at the last meeting about drainage. Got a topo map in here somewhere, but these are the same photographs of the backyards of these 2 houses. There are 2 detached garages. Both houses have walkout basements in the rear. The garages will remain the same. The top photo is the view from Cheviot Road, and the bottom view is the church, which is down the street just a little ways. Aerial view of the house. The other buildings on the property, there was a shed right behind one of the garages at this location, another shed towards the rear. Those have both been demolished since this photograph was taken. I think there was another shed further to the rear that I didn't catch in this photo that has also been demolished. The proposal is for a sand volleyball court and a basketball court. The proposal is to light the volleyball court at this time. One of the suggestions that staff had was that they be separated from the north and south property owners with a privacy fence. There was a request from one of the neighbors that that fence match a fence which is on their opposite side of the property. Again, the location of the suggested fence. And this is the topography map showing the approximate location of the 2 courts, and these are 1-foot contours. So there's about a 10-foot drop from one side of the lot to the other. The adjacent property owner talked about a creek. There's basically a swale that barely shows up on the topo map. I don't know if my arrow shows up well on the screen. And then there's a depression towards the back. It's not really a pond, but it's a wetland that shows up in this. There was some concern about that being increased with impervious surface or runoff created by, primarily it'd be the basketball court. The basketball court is the one furthest from that property. Sand volleyball court would obviously have less runoff because it would absorb water probably more than it would shed water. The BZA concerns at the conclusion of the public hearing was, number 1, parking, that a variance would be needed for the reduction of the required 16 parking spaces. We've been researching that some more. There is a possibility of reduction of parking spaces. First of all, we say that they can have no more than 10% over or 10% under. It's only 1.6 parking spaces in this particular situation. They can park 13 cars on site in such a way that you don't have to pull cars out in order to move cars. In other words, 13 free parking spaces that they can independently come and go. There is a provision for shared parking as long as the entrances to those parking lots are no more than 200 feet apart. The entrances of these driveways are 200 feet apart, or slightly less than 200 feet.
Which driveway is it?
The driveway to the house to the driveway of the church,
Right.
going down Cheviot Road. I'm sorry.
thought it was
no more than 500 feet.
For off-site parking.
Yeah. What I included in the staff report is if you walked from the volleyball court all the way out to Cheviot Road, across to the church driveway and into their parking lot, it came out to roughly 700 feet. But the 500 feet is actually just between what they call the entrance to the parking lot. It's interesting because I'm not sure these driveways really meet the intent of that or not, but in any way, there is some flexibility built into this, into the code. You do have a handout that came out in the packet. This was information provided by the church. They said lighting plans attached. There were no lighting plans attached, but we did receive a lighting plan, I believe yesterday, within the last couple of days. I've copied that for you tonight. This is the type of lighting plan that is called for in the code. However, we note that they're calling for 30-foot tall poles. We would only allow 24-foot high poles as the maximum for this type of lighting. And also the foot candles at the property line have to be less than 1. And my question was on the lighting plan itself, which was north, south, east, and west. The top of this plan is north. However, we don't know how far it is from the court to the actual property line. So this can be adjusted or redone, but as submitted, this doesn't meet the letter of our lighting laws. The recommendation at the last meeting was simply that they meet the requirements for staff approval for the lighting plan. But this gives you an idea what a lighting plan would look like. Also, there was a question about restrooms. Will they be available? The response was that they would install restrooms in the garage at the house at 8650 Cheviot Road. And until that time, they would install permanent or temporary portable toilets at the site. There was a question about stormwater runoff. What would be the impact? We tried to do some soils research, and quite honestly, I didn't find anything. Based on some of the poor drainage that we see in ponding and wetlands, that tells me that we probably are dealing with fairly impervious soil types, so there probably is going to be a lot of runoff. The applicant brought up the fact that they had torn down some sheds in the back. Those sheds did have roofs, which are impervious surface. They've reduced that while they're adding the basketball courts. The square footage is roughly the same, so they're thinking that the net runoff is probably not going to be any greater than what they had when the sheds were standing. And they can probably talk some more about that. Parking, they've addressed that the church is 275 feet away. They have lots of parking there. Their high demand for parking for the volleyball courts is sort of their off-peak demand, as in Sunday mornings when the church would have its highest peak demand for parking. The fence, they would agree to install a 6-foot high privacy fence on each side, stain and style to be determined. Hours of operation, they're still proposing 10 p.m. as the late hour for operation. And supervision and management, they've provided us with their church's policy for their youth ministry. In talking amongst staff, though, from a zoning standpoint, for us to administer or enforce a church's policy for how they do events would be virtually impossible. So we're not necessarily recommending that we in any way adopt or endorse their plan or their policies. Staff findings are the same as before, that the use as a private recreation facility is a conditional use in the R5 zone, use in accordance with the objectives in the Colerain Township Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Resolution. The conditional use will not substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of the neighboring properties and will serve the public convenience and welfare. Lastly, that the use will not create excessive requirements at public cost for public facilities and services, which will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. Our recommendations are as before, that outdoor recreation activities be restricted to between 10 and 9, that the 6-foot privacy fence be constructed, parking for vehicles be restricted to the paved areas, not be allowed on the grass. Lighting plan needs to meet the requirements of section, and Mr. Reininger did point out the section is correct on the slide. It's 12.9.2. I had a typo on my section number in the staff report. And that any future additional outdoor recreation facilities be submitted to the BZA as a modification of the conditional use permit. And 6 is that restrooms be available on site during the outdoor activities.
I know it's customary to have the questions after the public input, but just for the sake of the record being clear, it's actually 2 volleyball courts, isn't it? It's not 1 volleyball court that they've asked for? So consequently, it's 32 spaces, not 16.
I was reading the plan as 1. It is 2 volleyball courts?
There are 2.
Initial plan is to put 1 in.
But your application that you submitted asked for 2, correct?
Okay.
So it's 32 spaces that they're going to have, not 16.
Okay.
Which changes the dynamics
That does.
quite considerably. But again, I have lots of questions, but I don't want to interrupt our flow here. So, are there people? Would the applicant like to speak? Please, if you'd like to, please stand up here and say your name. You were sworn in, correct?
Yes, I'm Rick Blankenship on behalf of the church. So Marty pretty much spoke of everything that, and I know I will have some input once this gets going. So we do feel that parking at the church, it being only, 200-300 feet away, it's a reasonable request. And, we have plenty of parking up there, and there's a sidewalk everybody can come down. The property itself, as Marty had mentioned, we did tear down some buildings that the impervious surface should be equal to or similar to the basketball court that we're intending on putting in. The sand volleyball courts, obviously, they wouldn't increase or decrease any drainage concerns. We're in agreement with the fence, and we'll put that up whatever style is agreed on. And as far as supervision, I did bring Rick, one of the pastors, down here to speak on that. But all events will be supervised, and that's our intention.
Well, I know I'll have some questions for you, and I'm sure my colleagues will as well. But again, we want to close the public input portion first. But if there's nothing else you want to add, is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the proposal?
Rick did bring up one thing. At the 10 o'clock, we would like to appeal for the 10 o'clock. I know that you guys are looking at 9 o'clock. We initially asked for 10, and we really want to push for that if we could get the 10 o'clock curfew.
Okay, do you want to state a reason for that now?
We just feel that's a reasonable time. It's, most activities may not start till 6 o'clock in the evening, and by the time you get started, and wrap up, 10 o'clock, we just feel is a reasonable time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again. I've got some questions for you, but we'll hear some other people first. Anyone else want to speak in favor of the applicant? Anyone want to speak in opposition to the application? Yes, sir. Please step up here and state your name and address. You were sworn in, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Enderly, and my sister and I are co-owners of the property at 8682 Cheviot Road, which is directly adjacent to the 8666 property where they're.
Between the church and this property? Is that-
No, we're at the very end.
Okay.
So the property that's in question, where they're going to put the volleyball courts in, is directly right next to our property.
Okay, thank
so, and I have a multitude of concerns. Mainly the zoning change in general for a recreational use facility. To me, that's kind of a slippery slope. I don't know where that's going to lead down the road. I mean, it might be volleyball courts now. It could be something later. They talk about putting up a 6-foot fence is going to shield the light from a 20-foot light pole. If they put up 24-foot light poles or whatever we were talking about. And also, one of the things they said they don't think it'll substantially impact any of the ecosystem or any of the wildlife or anything like that. And I think we might argue over the definition of substantially for different people. So, what we have there is a very peaceful and tranquil place to live. I mean, I grew up there, and backyard's very. It's just a nice place to go and relax. There's wildlife, there's ducks, geese, and we've got this nationally recognized wetlands area, which I think will be a topic of Roland's discussion. But and I'm concerned about the impact it'll have on that for sure. But and over and above the volleyball courts and all that, they talk about added increase in traffic, added foot traffic, people walking down from the church and stuff like that. And no disrespect to the congregation or anybody that goes to the church or anything, but I mean, if this is a youth-based kind of a function, kids can be kids, and fences don't always keep everybody out. And we've had problems before with people walking around on the property, and that's not what the property was intended for originally, and we just like to keep it residential. My concerns that it's just going to get more and more and more. There'll be another building down the road, and if they have to put in bathrooms, we are sort of on the downhill slope of all that. I know the topography of the map and all that doesn't really show any substantial runoff, but when it rains, there's a lot of water that comes down those hills, and the volleyball courts and all that I know aren't going to contribute substantially to that, but if they go putting in bathrooms, or if they have to put in a separate bathroom facility or something down the road for a bigger recreation area or whatever, they're going to have to put sewer lines in up to the street. And then one of the main catch basins for the sewer lines is in the front of our property. They put Hamilton County come in and put in one of these big things, and I'm wondering how that's going to overwhelm that, what the repercussions of that's going to be down the road. And then on top of all this, what's that going to do to resale value? If when it comes time that we end up having to sell the property, if me or one of my kids don't move into it down the road, what's that going to do to, to have a big recreational facility right next door? I'm sure that's going to be detrimental to my property and a lot of the other neighbors that are still on the street. So those are my main concerns. I have some photographs and things of the property. I don't know if you'd be interested to see them or whatever, but these are just some views from our property, that kind of stuff, and some views of the pond and the wetlands area and stuff like that.
Pass them along, and then
Sure.
you can take a look at it too.
And I'm just worried about how that view's going to be disrupted. Especially if you put up a big privacy fence and big light poles and shelters and all this kind of stuff. So so just for the record, I'm opposed to it, just in general. So
Well, thank you very much. It's not easy to speak in favor or opposition in public like that, so I appreciate your remarks. And is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, ma'am. I should have taken you first.
I echo.
Why don't you come on up? I know. Ladies first, I guess.
I echo everything my brother said.
Why don't you just state your name again? I know who you are, but
Trudy Enderly, 8682 Cheviot Road.
thank you.
Thank you. I echo everything my brother said. He's co-owner in case I get goofy or die. So that's it. I'm strategically opposed.
Well-
With all due respect, I'm opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone? Yes, sir. State your name again, please, for the record.
Yes. My name is Roland Johnson, and I reside at 5200 Race Road in Green Township. I have some handouts here, some packets. Regretfully, I'm underprepared. I only have 3, but if you could all kind of refer to these.
Why don't you give us 2 and give the applicant 1? How's that?
Absolutely. And then I have an extra one when I'm finished. If you see, the packet has an announcement that this property is in conservation easement. The Enderley property, which is immediately to the north of the properties that are under discussion. And as we call it, I'm with the Land Conservancy of Hamilton County, now newly renamed Cardinal Land Conservancy, and I serve as vice president. And I contacted Trudy Enderley 10 years ago, and we developed a conservation easement on her property for the purpose of conserving and preserving the wetland on her property. Inside the packet you'll see on the left is just some information about our organization. We hold conservation easements in Colerain Township. As a matter of fact, we hold 4 conservation easements. And you'll see in some of the photographs supplied that they were photographed on October 28th last year, which was the 10th anniversary of the conservation easement that we hold with Trudy Enderley. The nature of the conservation easement is that it is stewarded by our organization, and the key word is in perpetuity. So we are to assure that this property will not be treated in any way inconsistent with the conservation purposes of the conservation easement. And this is duly recorded in the Hamilton County Recorder's Office and is legally binding. So it is our perpetual task to assure that the terms of the conservation easement be preserved. I would like to go through...
Just for clarification,
Sure.
The land that you're talking about that is subject to the conservation easement abuts this land, is that?
But immediately to the north of it, Trudy Enderley's property.
Thank you.
And so it contains 3.5 acres. And on the second page of this document, well, the first page you'll see that her home on Cheviot Road is an unassuming home, and you wouldn't know that there is a natural treasure there on her property. The next page shows 2 Google Map views showing the situation there in context with the church property, and that her property measures 933 feet by 151 feet and 3.5 acres. It consists in the back of a wetland and also a constructed pond or water retention facility, which has engaged much wildlife, both botanical and fauna. Some statements here on the next page. This is an unexpected wetland habitat at the rear of the Enderley property, and it delights all who encounter it. Made special by a flowing water aquifer that supplies it, the wetland required many lifetimes to evolve to its present state. Next page. Although small, the fragile wetland, a sedge meadow of quite rare quality, is a great asset, said George Derringer of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, who helped document the conservation values of the property. Its loss could happen in one day. It took centuries to create this superb sedge meadow wetland, and without careful conservation efforts, the loss of this wetland could happen in one day. Replacing it with another of equal quality might require half a millennium, Mr. Derringer says. And I would say that Trudy Enderley has a connection to the land. She has a spiritual connection to the land, and her philosophy of private stewardship and management led her to legally protect the land with a conservation easement. There follows a few statements speaking about the spiritual qualities of the land. And so I will move on to the next exhibit.
Okay.
I will say that I was looking at these Duncan factors, and number 3 said whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. Then I have 3 documents that follow, and one is dated January 2005 from the NRCS to Mr. John Williams of the NRCS local branch, and highlighted there says that there is an underground lateral movement of water from the higher ground, but made special by the occurrence of a flowing water aquifer for its source of water. Any disturbance of the soils of the area, especially to the south, would likely interrupt this water flow and eliminate or devalue the rare wetland area. There's more materials in this document, but that highlights the essence of this. The next document is also from to Mr. John Williams from George Derringer of the NRCS, and highlighted says this type ecosystem is rare to be found in suburban areas and offers significant environmental benefits to the area, and see enclosed data forms. The last exhibit here is a letter from Derringer of NRCS to, among other people, Holly Utrata Holcomb of the Soil and Water of Hamilton County, and lists data forms of the assets, the biological assets of this property. I would say that looking at the flow of water from the hillside that goes down to the lowland wetland of Ms. Enderly, there is a intermittent stream that comes from the general area of those proposed additions. This water flows and then filters through the aquifer to the east, to the back of the property, and in this 2-foot layer of soil, and provides the wetland with its nutrients and its viability. Then there is a natural or a man-made pond back there, but it is for the retention of water and provides a natural habitat for birds, wildflowers, wild botanical forms. So there's a lot of unique things in this area, and it's highly prized and it's highly attested to in these documents. I do believe that concludes my remarks. I'm speaking strictly to the natural aspects of this. Are there any questions or?
We certainly thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay.
I'm sure there'll be some questions afterwards.
Sure.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in
I
opposition?
do have another one now.
I know. I think everyone had a chance to take a look at it up here, and we gave one to Marty over there. So, yeah, we'll take that. We'll keep it up here. Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate it very much. It's a tough act to follow, I know, but is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
I'm the last person on your list.
Okay. And you were sworn in, correct?
I'm sworn in.
Your name and address, please.
Linda Agar, 8639 Cheviot Road. My concern is that I'm in the process of selling my house, and I'm very concerned about the impact of that sale. I don't want to lose the sale because one question would be, you'd have to put in a turning lane. Cheviot Road is busy enough that you would need a turning lane going south, certainly, to cross the traffic. Would the entrance to this place, is it going to be south of Donata, across the street from Donata? Where is it in reference, the entrance? Where would it be in reference to?
the entrance to this facility? Marty, do you want to, it would be between those two homes, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I can't see whether that's across from Donata, across from my property. I can't see.
I think is it on? Yeah. The street
That's
is
Donata.
right there. This is the driveway into the house, the two houses, so it's offset from that street.
Okay. So that's actually north of my house. So, but I did not know the nature preserve was back there, and that's got to be an asset to Colerain Township. I don't know why we would want to disturb that. And also, if I'd like to know, because like I say, I'm in the process right now of selling my home, and by the end of the week, and I will have to disclose this if this is going to be done. When are we going to know whether or not this is going to be?
Absent an unforeseen circumstance, you should know this evening.
Oh, okay. Okay.
At the conclusion of the presentations, we'll be asking some questions, and then we'll take a vote. So you'll know
How
this
should
evening.
I present that to my potential buyers?
Well, in my other life, I was a lawyer, but I can't give you legal advice, so I will defer to your lawyer
I'll
on
take
that.
practical advice.
I really can't answer that question for you, ma'am. I would suggest that, at least for the moment, let's wait and see what happens later.
Okay.
Okay? Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion of the meeting.
So move. Second.
A roll call, please.
Mr. Bartolt,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Reininger,
Yes.
Mrs. Pilson.
Okay, why don't we start on my left? Ms. Tilson, do you have some questions?
I do have a few questions, because I understand the concern about the wetlands, but I also, being a church member at a church in Avondale, actually, that does have a youth program, I do absolutely understand and appreciate the importance of having a youth program. So I have to wonder, just by looking at the pictures. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was saying that I appreciate just being a church member myself that has a youth ministry as well. I appreciate the importance of having a youth ministry, but I also appreciate the importance of the wetlands that are at issue here. And so I was wondering, because I cannot tell for sure just by the pictures, I mean, I see a little bit how far back the pond is on the neighboring land. But right here in this picture, I just wanted to know, do you have an idea of how far the volleyball, all the construction that would be required to have this volleyball and the basketball court? What's the distance between that and the wetlands that they're concerned about?
I'm not really.
Yes, please.
To the mic, please.
I'm not really sure what's defined wetlands. Is it the whole property, or is it just a section of the property?
And I'm not sure either, so I'm wondering if that's just something to take into consideration, because, I mean, to me, not being an expert on wetlands, certainly I'm an attorney, I don't do construction. I'm just wondering if it's this close to, and I guess it's just something more for you to consider, and anybody else can chime in and help me out here.
I think Mr. Johnson could perhaps help us out. Mr. Johnson, you want to step up to the mic? It is Johnson, right? Correct.
Johnson, that's correct. If I may offer my opinion,
Absolutely.
please. There is approximately where those two yellow rectangles are, and north of that, right above that, there is a swale that goes out and to the north and east and crosses diagonally across the property. This swale initiates the underground aquifer that the water carries all the way to the back of the property. It is also supplied by the hillside all the way down also, but it is initiated at this swale. and continues back. Now, the distinctive growth of the wetland is a bit further, maybe 200 feet further back. But it is now an underground aquifer that flows from that swale all the way back to the rear of the property.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Let's see. And you said there were sheds on the property before. About in relation to where you all are building, where were those sheds before?
The one you can see in the corner of the, right there,
Okay.
and then there's one further back here.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Reiniger.
Mr. Blankenship, if you'd please stay at the podium. I'd like to have you address the lighting requirement that you have. I assume that you authored this, or you had this?
I did, correct.
Okay. It says a 30-foot pole, and before I even get into how much lumens are at the edge of the property, we can only go, even if we consider it, to 24 feet.
Correct, Marty did make me aware of that.
And not knowing the engineering specifications that well, you are at least twofold or fourfold over the lumens at the edge of the property with the 30-foot pole. I don't know what the impact would be, but the lighting, the bleed out of the lighting would be significant on this thing. And now, if you'd stay there, Mr. Blankenship, Marty, if you would illuminate, play on words, the red line marking this, is that the property line or the volleyball, basketball court line?
That's the volleyball.
Okay, so that is not the edge of the property line, that's the edge of the court itself. Ah, okay, that makes a little bit there. All right. Then the perimeters where the actual illustration ends, is that your property line?
That I'm not sure. I sent it out to have it engineered, but I can't validate that.
So I appreciate the clarification that the red dotted line is the court, the play area.
That's what I believe it to be, correct.
And if I make the assumption, which is probably not a good thing to do, that the end of the diagram is the property itself, you're still out of compliance with the lighting issue.
Correct.
So
The guy that engineered it did not have the plot plan, so he wouldn't have known the boundaries of the property.
Well, that I know is one of the requests, so that I have a concern with that. And thank you, and I have a question for Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you submitted for the board's review documents, and the recorder should note that the board accepted it and reviewed it. The one dated January 21st, 2005 from Mr. John Williams, District Conservationist.
Yes.
At the Hamilton Service Center on Princeton Road. The bottom sentence, which I believe you probably highlighted.
Yes, I did.
It says, any disturbance of the soils in the area, especially to the south, would likely interrupt this water flow and eliminate or devalue this rare wetland area. In another document, it gives a soil profile.
Yes.
Depth in inches, and down to 5 inches, you got silt loam, and then there's a moderate, I don't know all the abbreviations, but a friable soil. So if the volleyball court is permeable, which is sand,
yes,
that wouldn't be the issue. The impervious surface of the basketball court would be the issue.
I would say the impervious surface obviously would be more of an issue, but I do question also the pounding activity of the volleyball court, the activity on there, and not necessarily of right on the court. There's going to be, other activity along the entire property, and then especially in the vicinity of the volleyball court. So I do believe that there would be an unfriendly impact on the water and the natural qualities of the soils, leading to this depressed area where the wetland is.
Well, I take some umbrage with the fact that walking on the ground is going to disturb the underground aquifer.
Not walking, but jumping and that sort of thing. So, I mean, there are going to be youthful exuberance on there, I would presume. So
I would hope so.
Yes.
Ma'am, only one at a time, okay? You can back up if you like.
Finish with Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I'm limiting myself now to this issue of.
Ma'am, please. Ma'am. Ma'am.
The issues, the concerns I have with your report, and I appreciate how detailed it was with the soil profiles and the concerns, but when there is an overarching segment that says any disturbance to the soils in the area, if someone wanted to plant a garden on their property, that would be a disturbance to the soils. That operative word for me is any disturbance, which is so overarching as to be prohibitive.
Well, may I comment on that? Because I think that if there were a gardening activity, that would be far closer to a natural use of the area than the sports activity. In fact, if I could venture an opinion, I think a natural use of that property would be far more friendly to the ecology than this particular sports activity. I'm just venturing an opinion here that gardening would be a far more desirable activity.
I would agree with you, but what you highlighted was any disturbance, and that's pretty broad.
That's pretty broad, but now we're talking about relative.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ma'am, I think you wanted to say one thing about just additional activity there.
Just a couple of issues. Mr. Johnson's doing a much better job at explaining this.
Giving himself enough credit.
But it offers some questions for you. If he's concerned about the pounding, certainly a 16 car parking space and the travel in and out of that parking, it would do more damage than pounding of people playing volleyball. And the second thing is that me and my neighbor both have two-story houses, so the lighting that you were talking about would filter. I mean, our bedrooms are on the second floor, so the lighting. I didn't say this before, but I didn't realize, but the lighting would be an issue for me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price.
If you could come back up, sir. I just have a question about the courts and the basketball court. So, assuming that the courts are allowed, I'm going to make an assumption here that says there's going to be spectators watching these events.
That's fair. That's a fair assumption.
So, does that mean you're going to be putting in a set of bleachers somewhere? Everybody's just going to stand around for a hour and a half basketball game?
We don't have plans to put them in at this time. As far as spectators, I couldn't say whether that'd be 2, 10, but it might be a family member. It might come up to watch, but in general, it's just a place for youth activities. It's not a league or anything like that. It's just members of the church itself just going up. So, but there might be an occasional odd man out or somebody that's just not playing it wants to watch.
Right. So, even though you're not planning them right now, you certainly couldn't put them on the neighbor sides because I don't think there'd be near enough room to go there. So they'd almost have to go toward the back of the courts, more further back toward the wetland area.
It's never been discussed, bleachers. The only thing has ever been discussed is possibly between the two courts is putting a couple steps that people could sit on. while the games are going on.
Okay,
But actual bleachers has never been discussed.
okay. That's the only question I had.
Sir?
Well, just one comment in general. It sounds like part of the problem is there's future things and we don't really have a master plan. It's like something might happen in the future, something else might happen. There might be a picnic shelter. And so that makes it a little more difficult because it's kind of haphazard right now. And regarding the soils, if there is a 10-foot slope from north to south or vice versa, so from one house property, there's two properties involved, so that's a 5-foot difference from Mrs. Enderle's to the first house, and then another 5 feet to the next house. So that's to make a level court, you have to cut into the hill basically. So, and then where you're going to do cutting and filling to create a level surface to play on. So you're going to be cutting into one side and filling on the other to create a level playing surface, so that's kind of problematic too. I don't think you would need retaining walls, but it's going to alter the topography. So that's kind of a concern of mine. And under staff recommendations, I mean, we can change the wording of that, but number 4, it says no additional stormwater runoff be created, but it really should say no water runoff onto adjacent properties, because I know Hamilton County doesn't want one property owner to put runoff onto another, and that's their rule. But in reality, it seems like they would want, for the wetlands to survive, they almost would want the runoff to go onto the adjacent property. And I guess the last thing, I agree that the code or the regulation does say 16 spaces per court. So 32, I would agree with Mr. Martin on that. And as far as the 10 o'clock versus 9 o'clock, so what are we saying? So at 9 o'clock, does everybody have to leave the property, or they just have to turn the lights off?
That's a good question.
Because they can still make noise and ruckus at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight.
So what is your all recommendations? Do we have to vacate the property, or?
Well, that's your property. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you proposing? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I would assume that at that point lights out, and then eventually they would leave the property. I can't say it would be immediate because I know the nature of,
Yeah.
once you get done, it may take 5, 10, 15 minutes before they, unless we impose rules that say that they have to leave right away.
Well, that's certainly something that we would have to make a part of any motion.
Yeah, and I'm also assuming that if this court were on the church's proper property down the street, I don't know if the wetlands issue is still an issue, or if it's strictly because it's adjacent to the wetlands.
Mr. Johnson?
Directly to your question, it is my belief that it would be much less of an impact than the immediate property. So one thought was that this facility be moved closer to the church and therefore be less impactful on the wetland.
So it's more of a concern because it's so close
Correct.
to the wetlands.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bartelt. Well, I have a number of questions. I was concerned about this proposal even before I'll refer to Mr. Johnson's smoking gun. I think the letter, again, with all due respect to Mr. Reiniger, I read that letter differently, and I read it as almost conclusive. I guess, in my opinion, it draws me the only conclusion that we should not approve this. But I do have some questions, and I want to tell you why, even before I saw that letter, I had some concerns about this. First of all, it is 32 required parking spaces, not 16. So it's a huge variance here, number one. Number two, it's not just a case of fitting 16 cars and 16 spaces on the property. Our code does require a certain square footage. It's 171 square feet per space. So I don't believe, looking at, I don't know the square footage there, but I don't believe that there's space for 13 cars. I think you can fit, it's like a used car lot. How many cars can you get on a used car lot? You can get a lot of cars on a used car lot. You can't park them there and have people in and out. You can park them there. So I think it's more of a situation where you can fit 13 cars on that property. So I don't think by any stretch of the imagination you meet that requirement. I was momentarily caught, I guess it momentarily paused when I thought about the 500 feet, but it's such a, in my opinion, a huge variance, and I use that word advisedly, from what I think was intended here, to use a parking area that is 500 feet away to satisfy that requirement, especially where it's in a residential area. And I know everyone is uncomfortable. It's a church. Everyone is very, I think, in agreement that what you're trying to do is admirable, commendable, something that we as a community would like to support, something I would like to support. I have, I have some knowledge of what you do at your church, and we certainly applaud that. But I read through the staff findings, and quite honestly, it says right here, the staff believes that it could be concluded that soils have poor permeability, going to Mr. Johnson's point. It talks about porta potties as opposed to restrooms. I don't even know if the people here understood that there would be porta potties on the site. That would even be one other thing that I think that they would have some significant problems with. I know that, yeah, sure, but let me finish. I know you have plans to put restrooms in the future, but part of the reason for tabling this for a month was to have all that kind of worked out. If you'll recall, you even, I think, asked me the question whether you should come in with some plans relative to ADA requirements, Americans with Disability Act requirements, and so on. And I, at the time, I suggested that you do that. I was a little taken aback going through the staff findings, and they're pretty specific. And frankly, I was surprised the staff, based upon all of that, which are fairly negative. It would be difficult, and I'm quoting from the staff findings, difficult to enforce personal conduct in a private recreational facility. I was surprised that the staff recommended approval. I really don't see any way that I could recommend approval here. I think it's well beyond what was intended for a private recreational facility. The wetland, I'm very pleased that we postponed it a month because we did not even know about the wetlands when we took this up last month. The presentations made by everyone this evening have been stellar and very complete and hard to argue with, quite candidly. So I'm sorry to tell you that, but I don't see any way to approve it. And if you'd like to add anything to that or clarify anything, I'll be happy to hear it.
I would like to ask, like parking when you have events here, how do you handle those? Because I know that this lot can't contain all the parking.
Well, again, I'm not sure. I understand that you brought that up, that the township occasionally uses off-site parking for township activities. But those are kind of one-off activities. And as the chair, it's my opinion that that's not a relevant discussion. What the township does for Taste of Colerain or what Colerain High School might do on occasion for a high school football game, I don't think is relevant to a situation where you've got a facility that's going to be used on a regular basis. We're talking about intermittent activities like the high school football games or Taste of Colerain or whatever. This is a regular activity that the neighbors are going to have to live with, at least during the warmer months. And if global warming is not a myth, it could be a lot of months. Certainly they'd be out there this evening probably playing. So you're talking about an 8 or 9 month span that the neighbors would have to live with this.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Same with the lighting. Because last month you had mentioned, the high school has lighting and neighbors deal with it, but, those games are just a couple of times a night. I know there's soccer and there's other things, but this potentially is 5 to 7 nights a week. I mean, we don't know. You haven't really said, but
yeah, I wouldn't want to tell you less than then.
just like the parking, I think the lighting is also, it's hard to use the high school as an example or set a precedent. It's a totally different situation.
not to pat ourselves on the back, it's very difficult when somebody comes in with something that's well-intentioned. It's easy to vote no when somebody comes in and they've been caught building up a room that they shouldn't have put on, or trying to do something that is in opposition, clear opposition to what the township wants. No one is suggesting that's the case here. It's just that the situation is that it's not the right place for it. I commend people that spoke in opposition, because it takes a lot of guts to stand up and speak against a neighbor, especially at church. I don't think you shouldn't take this personally, but and you may win. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm one vote on this board, but I am ready to vote. Is there anyone else that would like to ask any questions? Mr. Reiniger, you said. Yeah.
Just a clarification. There was an assumption made, but I'd like you to give me a clear number. How many times a week would this be used in optimum? It's going to start slow, it's going to build. What you figured, once a week, 4 times a week, 3 times a week?
Currently, they play on Wednesday nights and sometimes Saturdays. Would that be correct? That's what they currently play. I can't tell you that it would double, but I can't tell you it wouldn't, because once the court's there, it may encourage more activity, but it's designed for the youth within the church.
Sure.
So I can't tell you with any certainty.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions? Oh, one comment. If this is approved, you might look at permeable blacktop. There is an asphalt that is water permeable. So.
For the basketball
court. I don't know if we were making it out of concrete, then that's a different story. But there are permeable surfaces that are hard.
That's something we had not considered. I appreciate that. Now, regarding the lighting plan, is that something, if we move forward, we need to
The lighting plan is totally wrong.
Okay.
At least from my perspective. It may not be for others, but this is still a residential area, I believe.
My suggestion in terms of how we proceed, because I think if this is approved this evening, I think there's going to be a substantial number of conditions placed upon it. But I think before we do that, before we spend the time talking about that and debating what conditions should be on there, I think it might be more appropriate to take a vote to see whether that's even relevant. Okay? So with that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to either approve or disapprove, depending upon the preference of the mover. Mr. Bartlett.
I'll make a motion to not approve the motion, or the applicant.
I second.
Second that. Okay. Roll call vote, please.
So an aye vote is...
An aye, yes, thank you. An aye vote here would be to deny the application.
Mr. Bartolt.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Price.
Aye.
Mr. Reiniger.
Aye.
Mrs. Pilson.
Thank you very much. I wish you well, and I hope you can come up with something else that will work for the neighbors and for yourself, but this just isn't going to work. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, which should be very brief, or you're welcome to leave. It's up to you.
Not much left the rest of the meeting.
Right. The next item on our agenda, why don't we give the room a few minutes to clear this. Okay. The next item on our agenda for this evening would be the approval of the minutes of the February 24th, 2016 meeting. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Why don't you, Mr. Bartlett, why don't you?
I'm not ready.
Yeah. We have a couple,
I was just curious on the minutes. I know Mr. Martin's probably got more things than I do, but should at the top of it say minutes, meeting minutes or something, up in the very title of this document? Or is that not necessary? Okay. Board has, well, other than just a couple typos, I'm not going to worry about it. So, Mr. Martin, do you have?
well, unfortunately, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I have quite a number of, and they're really stylistic, excuse me, let me rephrase that. They're really grammatical changes. And the only reason, and in some cases content changes, but I'm concerned only because these are legal records in the hopefully unlikely event these ever go to an appeal court. We want to put our best foot forward on the minutes. So whatever you can do in the future to maybe proofread them a little bit better and make sure that you read them and they make sense, I think would be helpful to us. And again, I say that with all due respect. I know how busy you guys are. So please take my comments with a grain of salt and move forward.
Well, I think one thing we can appreciate too is the fact that we are recorded. So if push comes to shove, not only do we have LaCartha here with report, we also have a video recording to go back and fine tune the minutes.
I just want to make sure if we have an appeal, we put our best foot forward. And I'm sure as counsel, you'd like that to be the case too.
You'd be very surprised at what actually is presented by other townships and municipalities.
Well, that's why we're going to be Colerain's best, right? Amen. There you go. All right. So having said that, on the very first page where it says staff, that line says staff, this is a single case, but with two separate types of action. I think we just need a semicolon there. Then, let's see, 4 lines up from the bottom there. Secondarily, the criteria for the dimensional variance is that the board would need literal enforcement. That just doesn't make any sense. I think what it's supposed to say is secondarily, the criteria for the dimensional variance is that literal enforcement. So I would just delete the board would need. I just think that phrase somehow dropped in there and it doesn't fit. Let's see. On the third page, the third line, that the building could be moved into a different area, not in a different area. And then I think I would take out the word would, move to a different area, but that they would like to keep the building in line. This is the only substantive comment that I have towards the second last paragraph, starting with this property contains 2 single-family houses, and I guess is located north of Friendship Missionary. And then the fifth line, for this conditional use, we are classifying as private recreation. I think we are classifying this proposed use, I think, as private, so you don't want to add the words, this proposed use. I don't know what you mean by the standards have cross references and for churches. That sentence just doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't know what was intended there.
Which line?
It says the standards have cross references and for churches, period. I don't know what was meant there, but maybe.
Have no cross references. Have cross references for churches. The word "and" should be not included.
And then it says with private recreation, there are no performance standards cross-referenced. What do you mean by performance standards?
In the zoning code, there's a list of permitted and conditional uses.
All right.
And if there are performance standards associated with them, it's kind of in a grid. The far column says performance standards.
Okay.
In this particular case, there's a blank.
Okay.
So there are no performance standards.
All right.
Reference.
Then the next page, again, the application was for 2 sand volleyball courts. So I think that's again a substantive thing we do need to put in 2 basketball courts. I think that's about it. Again, I know you've got a tough job. You're just, walking into a lot of work. So I certainly don't want to have you spend a lot of time on these minutes. But if you can just make sure that we kind of read them and just make sure that everything is copacetic. That'd be good.
I appreciate that you have read these.
Hey, I'm retired. Lots of time and no money.
It makes it look like we didn't read them.
I don't know about that, but I probably need to get another hobby. I know this code too well.
It's probably a committee you could be on.
Yeah, probably. Okay. I understand there are no administrative matters.
Did we have a vote on the minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry. We need a vote then on the minutes as amended. A vote as amended. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bartolt?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Reininger? Ms. Pilson?
Aye.
We have a motion and second on that.
Well, I don't think we didn't have a motion in a second. I think
On the minutes, Mr. Bro?
he just did a roll call. I mean, officially, we should have a motion
Yeah.
So you,
as
I
amended.
think it was, because you made the motion, I seconded, then
Okay.
went into correction.
Chairman.
I'm sorry, I missed that. So that's
No problem. Yeah, we did.
Sorry.
No problem. The next meeting is April 27th, 2016. Do we have any matters?
no, we do not.
No. Okay, so there is no meeting in April.
Right.
so I had a question. Are we still looking for alternates?
Yes, we need one.
And that's going to happen. I know Jenna was saying she wasn't sure if it could happen because it's supposed to happen in
I
January.
think we're going to move forward with finding an alternate.
So there will be.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm confused. I'm still an alternate though, right?
Yes.
We
Okay.
have two alternates for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Did that get filled?
No.
There's two alternates.
There are 5 permanent members and 2 alternates.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Duh. He's
Mr.
just
Roberts,
not-
yeah. He and I look a lot alike. He's a lot younger, though.
I don't know how I forgot about him. He is the chairperson.
He'll be very. You forgot. I'm going to tell him that you forgot
Please
him.
don't tell him that. I don't know why I thought I would see him in the audience, please. But,
No, he's trying.
it's been a long day. Forgive me.
Nope.
I'm not even really
No problem. Any other administrative matters, Marty? Okay. With that, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
A roll call on that?
Mr. Bartolt? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Reininger?
Aye.
Ms. Pilson?
Adjourned.